Every drop of water is part of a journey. It begins as water vapor that falls to earth as rain. For the next 25 years, it's filtered through volcanic rock. At last, it arrives at its final destination. Really? Can somebody come fix this?
When it comes to water, don't waste a drop. You don't have to go to extremes to save water. For easy water-saving tips, visit boardofwatersupply.com. You don't have to go to extremes to save water. For easy water-saving tips, visit boardofwatersupply.com.
All right, good afternoon, everybody. This is our annual budget workshop. So just one item for information today, and it's all ready to go. Nice haircut.
Oh, thank you.
Chair recognizes Mr. Robert Morita. He'll be conducting this workshop meeting on the proposed fiscal year 2019-2020 Operating and Capital Improvement Program (CIP) budget.
Okay, thank you for that. My wife gets really annoyed when I notice her haircut like a week later. Good afternoon, Chair Andaya, board members. Thank you all for attending today's workshop. So we do this annually as an opportunity to focus in on a single subject, which is the annual operating and capital budgets. And it gives us the opportunity, or gives you the opportunity, to ask questions in depth as you wish. And it allows us an opportunity, if we're unable to answer it today, that it gives us an opportunity next week at the regular board meeting to follow up with answers. So this afternoon, we will be covering both the FY 2020 Operating and Capital Improvement Program budget. So to kick things off is, at a summary level, this slide shows you the FY 20 operating and capital budgets in comparison to fiscal year 19 adopted. And so the operating budget for 2020 increases by 18.1 million, or about 9.7%. The capital improvement program budget increases $27.8 million at 20.1% overall. The increases are consistent with the long-range financial plan as well as the water master plan that we had presented to the board over the past couple of years. And what we wanted to point out with the 2020 budget, which differs from previous budgets that we have done in recent past, is that with the 2020 budget, the Board of Water Supply will be going out with a revenue bond issue in order to help finance the capital improvements that are planned in fiscal year 2020. This will be the first time since fiscal year 2006 that Board of Water Supply is going out for a bond issue for new funds. We've done refunding of higher interest rate bond issues in the past in 2012, fiscal year 2012 and 2014. But that was, again, basically trying to take advantage of lower interest rates at that time, but those were not new monies. So this is the first time since 2006. The bond issue is anticipated to be about $150 million, and this will definitely come before the board for the board's approval. The $150 million is anticipated to cover 2 fiscal years worth of needs. We don't think it's practical to come to the board each year for separate bond authorizations. So just bear in mind that this is anticipated for over 2 fiscal years. In terms of the operating fund, or basically we refer to it as cash, we are anticipating about a $7 million increase in revenues compared to fiscal year 19. Majority of the revenues come from ratepayers, from water consumption. And as mentioned earlier, operating expenditures is expected to increase about $18.1 million. In terms of overall resources and expenditures, the thing to take away from this table is that every year, and when it comes to budgeting, every year we start with a beginning balance, similar to your own personal checkbooks. We start with a beginning balance, and that is basically treated as revenue. So it's effectively the monies that were unspent from prior fiscal years that start us off with the next fiscal year. And on top of that are added revenues from water consumption, any lapses to previous encumbrances. And then layered on top of that is the operating expenditures, the amount of cash funds used for capital improvements, special expenditure funds, fund reimbursements, giving us total expenditures. So in the end is a ending balance, which again carries forward to the following fiscal year. And FY19 is the current fiscal year that we're in, and this is what is anticipated to happen at the end of this fiscal year, with an ending balance of $69.7 million, which leads us into the fiscal year 2020 budget. So one thing to note, though, is, and this was intentional, in previous fiscal years, the Board of Water Supply, was carrying over a fairly substantial carryover balance each year. And that becomes a difficult challenge in the sense where it's always good to have the cash reserves. Don't take me wrong on that. But it becomes a balance where you begin to have to ask the question, are we overcharging effectively? And so what we did over the last 2 to 3 years is that we've been trying to align spending closer with the actual budgets. So when we come forth with a budget, we're making a concerted effort to ensure that the budgets are executed as planned, because that's what we're presenting to you, that's what you're authorizing. So over time, the spending has gotten a little bit better in terms of matching the budget expenditures. In prior budgets, we were spending roughly 85% of the budgets that were appropriated. But over the last year or two, that number has tightened up a little bit, where now we're spending closer to 90% of what's been budgeted. And so with that begins to affect our ending balance. And so this is what this table shows. Everything is in line in this budget with the adopted board policies, the financial policies. There are 2 main policies that we want to address. The debt service coverage ratio, effectively, and again, this was all part of the package that the board adopted previously. The financial plan maintains that the budget shall cover at least 1.6 times the annual debt service in the budget. And I'll show you the numbers shortly. And also a working capital account, which is, the target is to eventually get a working capital account effectively cash, that is the equivalent of 180 working days of operation. So about a half a year's worth of operation. The policy calls for this, and on top of that is that it states that this account should not have less than 60 days worth of reserve of working capital in it. As far as operating fund expenditures, this pie chart shows you the allocation between the various expense categories. So for the 2020 budget, about 17% is with personnel services, 26%, a little more than a quarter, is our materials, supplies, and services. 3% is equipment, 8% is debt service, 18% is fixed charges, which includes electricity, employees' retirement system, and health fund costs. And 27% of that goes into our capital improvement program budget. And then you'll see there at the top, we're budgeting for about $500,000 in waivers of the water system facility charge. This just shows you the year-over-year differences by those same categories. And so what you can see here is that there's year-over-year, the biggest difference comes from the materials, supplies, and services, as well as in the fixed charges. So looking at the operating and CIP budgets over the past few years, we were successful in bringing the operating budgets down over the past 3 years. Again, that was in an effort to right-size the budget, but at the same time, it was to free up enough resources because we knew that we had a larger capital improvement program budget coming forward. So as you can see, there is an increase in fiscal year 2020. It's still lower than the budgets that we presented back in 2017. And so when you see the operating budget compared to the trend with the CIP budget, you'll see that operating budget was reducing, but at the same time, the CIP budgets were increasing and will continue to increase in order to meet the goal of 21 miles a year of replacement pipe. Some of the highlights of the operating budget. Under salaries, there's no increase in any in position counts. Last year, if you recall, last year's budget, or the current fiscal year 19 budget, requested and was granted an additional 17 positions. So that brought us to the total full-time equivalent count of 741 that we have today. So today there's no change to that. And in terms of dollars, there's a $247,000 increase in salaries, and that's largely attributable to the full year effect of collective bargaining costs. Under the material services and supplies categories, some of the highlighted items that lead to the increased 2020 budget is $2.2 million to replace an RO line for the recycled water system, $2 million to conduct a TCP advanced treatment study, $2 million for contractual services for drinking water system and vulnerability risk assessment and water resource protection, $1.5 million in funding for emergency road repairs and BWS facility pavement repairs, $1.2 million for consultant services to upgrade the instrumentation and controls for the water distribution system. In equipment, $1.2 million for new and replacement vehicles, and a And on top of that is $700,000 for 2 mobile generators. And these generators are both eligible for 75% FEMA reimbursement. Fixed charges, there's a $1.8 million increase in employee retirement system costs and a $2 million increase for electricity expenses. Again, this shows you over time. And on this chart, it's actually 3 years of actuals and the last two budget years, and by category, showing where the various expenditures in the budgets are occurring. On the other side of the ledger, which is revenues, water sales are projected to be relatively flat for over the 2019 budget. Factored into fiscal year 2020 revenues is the scheduled water rate increase happening in July of this year. And the 2020 budget projection is primarily due to stable potable water consumption in the near term. So what this next slide shows is the total budget resources versus total expenditures. So the basic takeaway is that each year you want to make sure that your revenues are greater than your expenditures. What this also points out is that part of our revenues includes fund balances. And these fund balances are used for a couple of purposes, and we spoke about them earlier under the financial policies, for our debt service coverage and for our working capital. And on this next slide, we show you the composition of those balances here. So while it looks like there's millions of dollars sitting in as part of our fund balances, these amounts are part of our policies, that they are expected to be there, and that there are specific reasons why they need to be there. So in fiscal year 2020, you'll see there that there's $30.4 million, and that is part of our debt service coverage ratio, the 1.6, at the minimum of 1.6 times our annual debt service amount, and also $39.3 million, which is our working capital account. And the working capital account is important for a couple of things. Number one is basically for unanticipated events. If we ever get hit by a disaster, and the whole lessons learned, say from areas like in the Caribbean, the Key West, Puerto Rico, it's important to build this reserve, because when a large-scale event happens, we will need to rely on this cash amount to hold us over until things can get back to normal. And it's also largely beneficial because we are planning to go out with a bond issue, a revenue bond issue. Having a stronger cash position is also beneficial to us when the investors and the bond underwriters look at our financial statements. All right, I went through that kind of quickly, but at this point, are there any questions? Because we're going to move into the capital improvement program part of the budget. Yes, Ross.
So, Mr. Morita, as far as salaries are concerned, the FTEs are going to be the same.
Correct.
What's the percentage of vacant positions right now?
Percentage of vacant positions, I'm going to have to look back here. Michelle Thomas.
Come up, I think I have a number, but I want to make sure my number is correct. Please identify yourself.
I'm Michelle Thomas, the Chief Human Resources Officer for the Board of Water Supply. I don't have an exact percentage for you as of today. However, it's been for the past couple of months right around 20%, 18 to 20% for the board.
And that is over 100 positions.
That's correct.
So long-term, do you expect it to remain relatively the same because of the fluctuation of people that are leaving for whatever reason, and then new people that are coming in? Is it something that you expect to see constant?
That's a very good question. It's a subject of two things: supply of good workers, employees to come into the organization that want to work here, but it also is a reflection too of our aging workforce. Because we have a number of employees, quite a number that are able to retire even right now, and in the next 5 years or so, that number will increase. If we can hold steady, that would be nice, or reduce this number, that'd be even better. But I'm also a realist that we are, because of our aging workforce, are going to be facing some challenges in the future. I'm guessing that Department of Facilities Maintenance is also challenged in this area too.
Right, well, I think our vacancy rate is probably almost double what yours is.
I don't know how you continue to work on it.
But, with that, we recognize that there's gonna be attrition largely due to retirements for all of the people that are eligible. But just also curious whether or not the ability to backfill is keeping up with demand, and whether you see that being able to continue as you've been able to see the performance of that system working, but is it something where maybe the process is being taxed as far as its ability to deliver the quantity of people that you need?
I think, our HRO office, Human Resources Office, is working really hard, and same thing with the city's Department of Human Resources. But just thinking off the top of my head, I think if we continue to approach recruitment and filling of vacancies, maybe in the same fashion we have for decades, that we may not end up with a result that we're gonna like, especially since we're facing the challenges. So I think there's going to be the need for innovation in this area on how we can be competitive, not only with the private sector, but the federal government's actually becoming one of the primary employers that are getting the engineers and other professionals to work for the federal government. So I think there needs to be some innovation there, and I believe the DOT, Jade, I think you folks are trying to pilot some different innovative approaches to recruitment and filling of vacancies.
We're doing a wiki, trying to get lists faster from dealer. And then we're also, we're doing a lot of the positions that are unique to DOT. We're instead of waiting for dealer to give us a list, they give us the authority to recruit for those positions.
Yeah, so I happened to come across the announcement or the flyer about that, and I shared that with our Human Resources Department at the city. Say, can we do something like that? BWS would be willing to pilot something to see if it'll give us a chance to make headway. The University of Hawaii had their graduation ceremony this past Saturday at Manoa, and that's why I was stuck in traffic coming down University Avenue, but that's okay. I am heartened that I heard that the College of Engineering, they had a ceremony separate from the main graduation ceremony, and from what I heard, there was like 60 students or so graduating in civil engineering, over 100 in mechanical engineering, and maybe close to 100 in electrical engineering. So I'm very hopeful that if they can continue to push out graduates, especially from the College of Engineering, and for us, for you and I, DFM and BWS, it's also the civil engineers. We need more civil engineers graduating to help fill the voids that will be left by old guys like myself when we retire. So there's a chance, but definitely I think there's a need for innovation, and some of it may need to start at the state level with some of the civil service laws to give us more, give us the flexibility to take different approaches. One caveat, and I remind this, I always bring this up at the legislature when I have a chance, just be careful when you deal with the the benefits, retirement, post-employment benefits, retirement and health benefits post-employment. Because right now, it's hard for salaries to be competitive. And where those benefits, health and retirement, over time at the state level has been eroded. So we're kind of losing that edge right now, that competitive edge that we had, because we couldn't pay more than the private sector. But so hopefully they'll be careful when they touch those benefits, because that could trigger a mass exodus that we would all feel the pain of. 40%, Ross, how do you do it?
I think Kathleen could tell you that we don't always do it. So.
I'm on the similar track with Ross's question. I think one of the things that stood out to me was that personnel costs did not change between last year and this year, which tells me that you're assuming we're not going to be successful at ratcheting up our recruiting. And I think, I mean, the ideas you just posited, I'm just wondering, what are we doing, actually doing? Are we organizing other departments to make changes in the law? Are we, you know, what are we doing? Because if we hope to continue to ratchet up CIP, we're not going to keep up. And we're going to end up collecting money, but not putting it out because we don't have the manpower to put it out. And so, I don't expect an answer. I'm just saying, I think we are all worried about how we keep up with those plans to accelerate the replacement and to keep up on the repairs if our personnel can't continue to grow appropriately.
You bring up an excellent point, because right now it isn't keeping up, and in time the gap will grow larger. At the low unemployment rate right now that Hawaii's experiencing, finding good quality, because say we could fill it with people, but it may not be the best, the type of employees that we need to provide the service that our customers expect. But I think your point is well taken. The idea that maybe the legislative session has just ended. We have about 6 months to get some ideas together that we can maybe push at the next legislature, and the key is actually going to approach the key committees at the legislature before January, before they start the session. So it's an excellent point. I will take this up with the administration.
And I think it's more than that. I think maybe we need to deliver the service in a different way. And, you know, in a different way, using other, you know, using outside labor and using, or more so than we do even now. And I realize that a lot of our work is put out for private contractors. Maybe, I don't know what the answer is. I just know that this is not gonna work long-term.
Yeah, and that is, so internally, maybe getting together with departments, directors like Ross, ourselves, and other departments that are struggling with DHR, just to come up with some ideas on proposed legislative changes that could give us tools to be more effective. The other thing I've tasked our Human Resources Office, sorry Michelle, is that there is going to be a conference coming up on the mainland that she'll be attending, to go to that conference with the idea of coming away with some good ideas that others have, because what we're doing here is not unusual. I mean, our struggles here are not unique to just Honolulu Board of Water Supply or Department of Facilities Maintenance. So can we learn from others across the country that have maybe found different things that are more effective that we could consider? So I've tasked our HRO office to come up with a succession plan or strategy for consideration by the board. In addition to, we'll explore the legislative actions as something that we can look at. Delivery of services, we're leveraging of technology and other service providers. Yeah, I think that some of it may be unavoidable, that we might have to go there, because at the end of the day, we still have to provide water service to our community. They still have to be able to turn on the tap or their faucet in the morning when they wake up, and clean, safe drinking water will flow out of those faucets. And when they flush their toilet or take a shower, it's gonna be there for them to drink and cook with and clean with. If you have any other ideas, I'm all ears too.
I would also like to add that part of the reason why the actual funding isn't changing as much is not that our efforts haven't increased. It's a little bit more for us to be realistic as to when we can really fill these vacancies based on our current recruitment process in the civil service. So we're trying to be more realistic and fair to the ratepayers in that respect.
So we took a real hard look at realistically, when do we think we can fill this position over the next 4 quarters? Should we fully fund it for the full 12 months or partially fund it based on the rate the civil service process works through the system? So we didn't want to tie money up in the personnel budget, but push money to other budgets like into the CIP, so we can fund actual improvement projects to our system. Good questions and suggestions. Thank you.
Robert, I had a question about the carryover idea. I mean, I've been on the board a couple of years, and we always have that conversation. And I'm really glad to see it going down in your forecast, because I agree with you. I don't think we should be hoarding money if it's the ratepayers that create the
Yes.
money. But you said we used to be spending at about 85%, and this past year at 90%. So shouldn't the carryover go up as opposed to down? I mean, if we budget at X and we only spend 90%, so we take the carryover from the last year and another additional 10%, shouldn't it be going up? But you have it really dropping, and that's a really good thing. I guess I wanna know, how did that happen?
Yeah, because basically, like I mentioned, the budgets, the overall budgets actually were being brought down over the last few years. And so it was that effect of right-sizing the budgets, bringing it down so that there wasn't as much unspent funds year over year. So it was just basically the bottom line budgets that were being brought down over the last 3 years that led to that. No, I get your point though. You know, we're spending more, but it's largely this effect right here.
What is the $2 million we're spending on vulnerability risk assessment?
Oh, perfect.
I can answer part of that question. Okay, so there's something that happened in 2018 that was passed, a federal law. Let me bring that up, actually. So it was part of the America's Water Infrastructure Act of 2018. That is requiring utilities, community water systems, and Board of Water Supply, all our systems are what they call community water systems serving more than 3,300 people. We have to be able to self-certify to the US EPA by March of next year. And they just published it in the Federal Register in March of this year. We have to be able to self-certify that we are meeting, well on our way, or meeting the requirements that the EPA will set. And the EPA will come out with a guidance in August of this year. So between August and March, we are going to be on a very tight timeline to get everything together to the place where we can self-certify to the US EPA that we're complying with their requirements.
Their requirements regarding the delivery of the quality of water?
It is actually talking also malicious acts to contaminate. So after 9/11, in 2002, they passed something called the Bioterrorism Act of 2002. So this kind of rolls it up into that, but also resiliency from natural disasters like hurricanes, also cyber security, because an increasing trend is toward increasing attacks on through cyber attacks on especially on utility control systems, hacking our computers basically.
Does it include effects of sea level rise on our systems and what is or is not in the?
That may be part of it on a longer term. It also looks at financial resiliency. So it's covering a number of things. So we're going to need to make sure our plans are updated. And we're going to be self-certifying to the EPA. We won't be required to provide a copy of our plans like we did back in the early 2000s, but we have to be able to self-certify. The Department of Health is not involved. This is something we do directly to the US EPA, that utilities. So we're looking at all of our water. We have 8 community water systems. Most of them are large, that have a March deadline. Some are smaller, but our plan right now is to complete the assessment and be able to self-certify by March of 2020 for all 8 water systems, or what they call community water systems. And that's part of the effort here. But there's I think the other area is to look at opportunities for source water protection too. There isn't a strong source water protection program, and the Department of Health's approach, I think, has to defer to the counties to do this, which I'm not sure if I fully agree. But we need to do more work in that area.
Thank you.
I'd be glad to share the Federal Register publication with you.
I'm less concerned about responding to federal initiatives as I am about some long-term thinking about the vulnerability of our systems. I think sea level rise is a fact of life. I think we're seeing more and more hurricanes in the Pacific.
The intensity is increasing too.
Those are things that we need to be concerned about, because we got to deliver water. I mean, if the power goes down, I don't know how we deliver water, but
we're completing right now a research project with the Water Research Foundation. It's funded 50-50, BWS and Water Research Foundation on climate resiliency. So if I could put this maybe on a topic for a future board meeting, to update the board on our efforts to address climate resiliency.
thank you.
Okay.
Sure.
So the last time we went to the market is 2006. So how much do we have outstanding in the bonds?
That's our waterworks controller to come up with the
Oh.
number of remaining bonds or.
No, I think Stuart can find it.
Okay. So that was the last time we issued new bonds. Like Robert mentioned, 2012 and 2014, we basically refinanced existing debt to get lower interest rates and create a savings.
So what do you, if we're gonna raise 150 million, how many, or how much increase you think on the debt service is gonna be? We're paying about 34 million.
The estimated debt service payment on $150 million.
Yeah,
That
increase,
measure.
you're gonna be paying.
Yeah, I don't have the number right now. Well, do you have an estimate on the, I'll have Joe Cooper see if he can come up with the answer. If not, we'll have to get back to you. What the estimated debt service, which depends on what the rates are at the time, for the revenue bonds that we issue, that we are proposing to issue here. Go ahead, Joe.
Yeah, no, I didn't bring the estimated debt service for this $150 million. It won't hit until the following year because if we plan to issue the bonds or beginning in the third or fourth quarter, The actual debt service won't start until sometime in fiscal year 2021. Currently, I'm trying to think we have, I'm just, combined debt of probably, I don't know, $800,000 or something, so 150 million is not a large increase in our debt service. When we come forth to put forth the bond resolution, part of when we issue debt, we do what's called an initial bonds test, which actually calculates out what our expected debt service would be and what the percentage is to give not only the bondholders assurances, but the board assurances that we have adequate revenues to cover that debt service.
So that's a good point for the board, the public hearing later this month on the budget. We'll have the number, estimated debt service for the proposed $150 million issue.
And
And
also, what is
and the
right now, what is outstanding?
I think the 2006 issue, there might have been maybe a couple $100 million still outstanding, but I just want to be careful. You have the
The 2006 issue was about half and half. Half was refi and half was new money. And then going from the 2012 issue and 2014, that was all refi money.
Right, but we'll get back to you at the board public hearing with the number of how much is outstanding past revenue bond issues.
Or
And
as of today, how much is outstanding?
Right, right. Good question. We'll make sure we have the answer, and also the debt service on $150 million.
I got a couple. Mr. Morita, so for fiscal year 2020, the operating budget looks like increased to 204 from 186. Moving forward, I know it's early, but moving forward 2021, do you foresee a continuing declining trend in the operating budget, or are we looking at increase,
That's a little bit hard to tell at the moment, but typically what happens is, and these highlighted examples are good examples where, say for example, let me back up one in this case. Say like the 2.2, like for the RO line as well as the advanced treatment study.
Yeah.
These are effectively one-off items for this particular budget year. So the following year, these would not necessarily duplicate itself. But what might take its place are other needed either studies or projects that have to go into the operating budget. We're not necessarily aware of any large scale operating costs that will continue to increase over time. The only one, the reason why I had to back up was that on this particular slide here, we talk about a $1.5 million increase in emergency road repairs and paving projects. This is something over the last few years anyway, it's become, this one has increased, I think, substantially in the last 4 budgets. I think three or four budgets ago, this amount, that the total amount right now that we're budgeting for in 2020 is $8.5 million for paving. About 3 budgets ago, it was $6 million. And it's not necessarily because there are more breaks, therefore more paving. It's the costs that we're being assessed for this emergency type work. That's where the biggest escalator is coming in. So there are other expenses outside of our control. That's one example. Retirement system is another one. It really depends on the retirement system and how the investments go. So all the jurisdictions are affected by that. Electricity costs is a major component as well. That one also, we're subject to the rates like everyone else. But just rest assured that we do go through the budget, and we don't like looking at large number increases. That's just not something that's really acceptable to management here. So we will make every effort to go through it in order to try and flatten any increases that happen going forward.
Although if I could add, I guess Robert is talking about externalities or external issues that sometimes we become subject to. If there is if oil becomes an issue globally and oil prices start to go back up, then our power costs, but oil also affects other materials too. And unfortunately, we seem to be entering into some trade conflicts too that could have an effect on our prices also. So there are some issues that are going on right now that kind of make me a little concerned.
Okay, my only other comment was, I guess, along the lines of comments from board members Sasumura and Soon. I'd like to take a deeper dive on the recruitment personnel issues, whether it be to form a working group or committee, or maybe getting it into the agenda for our board meetings. I think it's something that we need to do. It's something that I've been watching for a couple of years now, and it comes up in various fashions, and just afraid if we just leave it the way it's going, I don't think it's going to change. Not that we have the solution or the answers, but probably want to starting soon to take a deeper dive.
Yeah, let us. It might be good actually, because you've just been hearing us talk in front of the board, to maybe bring some others that have a responsibility to the process at the table. I think it would be good, like our Department of Human Resources, or even the State Department of Human Resources Development, DHERD, and what the state is trying to do and what the city is trying to do too. Because we both function under the same state laws, under the civil service regulations. Thank you.
Before we leave, Robert, I want to say one thing to the last thing you said. I think all of us don't want to spend money unnecessarily, but I, for one, I don't have a problem with investment today for long-term gain. I don't mind seeing the budget go up in research and development and how we fix the personnel problem issues. That doesn't bother me if we can see long-term gain. I just wanted to say that.
We do appreciate that. I think everyone views things the same way, but I'm very happy to hear that. So thank you for that. At this time, if there are no more questions, we'd like to move into the capital improvement program budget. So to present this part is Jason Takaki, Program Administrator for the Capital Projects Division.
Thanks, Robert. Let me see. Chair Andaya, board members, the Capital Improvement Program, as you know, is easily the department's most significant annual undertaking. In accordance with the Water Master Plan, the CIP addresses the immediate needs of the water system and the needs for continuous delivery of water and the safe and efficient operation of our facilities. This year's program, as every year, is crafted around the Board of Water Supply's vision and mission of water for life, safe, dependable, and affordable water now and into the future. It's aligned with the department's strategic plan, the goals and objectives of the divisions in support of that plan, and the Board of Water Supply's 6-year long-range capital improvement program. This year's $166.3 million capital improvement program carefully balances the requirements of ensuring safe and dependable water delivery with cost-effective resource allocation. As in previous years, the organization of the CIP is unchanged. Research and development explores new resources and provides for system improvement needs. $6.25 million is proposed in this category. Renewal and replacement addresses the needs of the existing water infrastructure. $115.9 million is proposed in this category. Finally, the third project category is capacity expansion for water supply facilities. $21.8 million is proposed for these projects. This table provides a matrix of the totals by funding source and the project categories. So as you can see, $61.9 million will be provided from the operating fund. An additional $8.3 million in operating funds will be appropriated for projects that are considered SRF eligible and can be funded through low-interest loans from the Safe Drinking Water State Revolving Fund administered by the State Department of Health. $23.7 million will be provided from the Special Expendable Fund. And finally, $65.3 million will come from proceeds of a planned bond issuance that Mr. Morita just mentioned. This graph illustrates the volume of this year's proposed CIP in relation to past years and the department's performance in encumbering the annual CIP appropriations. This slide illustrates the distribution of this year's projects around the island of Oahu as we manage and maintain an island-wide water infrastructure. The experts, our division heads and staff officers, are here to answer any of your questions about and provide greater detail on any specific project in the FY20 CIP. But I'd first like to present some highlights of what we're proposing in the capital improvement program. Category 1, research and development. We will continue to use construction management services for selected projects to increase our capabilities and capitalize on training opportunities to increase in-house construction management competencies. Additional groundwater monitoring wells are planned for Halava Valley to check for possible aquifer contamination. We will video log, clean, clear, and test the Wailai Nui well. And we'll prepare an environmental assessment for the possible development of a site for up to 3 reservoirs to add up to 8.5 million gallons of storage to the 180 system. In Category 2, renewal and replacement, we address the needs of the existing water infrastructure. We will replace pumping units at Mililani Wells 2 and Ho'ai'ai Wells. We will renovate the Waipahu Wells 1 station and continue with more pump renewal and replacement projects to address the needs identified by our engineers and the Water System Operations Division. Category 2, renewal and replacement, also includes the needs of our aging water main infrastructure. Our largest asset is the underground distribution and transition main system, and just over $53 million are allocated for pipelines. 8.3 miles of main replacement are scheduled for FY20 construction in areas including Kamehameha Heights and Makakilo. And this is in line with our target of 21 miles of main replacement per year by FY27. In support of an expanding construction program, new pipeline replacement design projects will be initiated for 15.6 miles of water main to address aging infrastructure in areas ranging from Ewa Beach to Kaneohe to Hau'ula. Just for your information, there are currently 13.3 miles of pipeline replacement in various stages of construction island-wide. Category 2 renewal and replacement also includes the appurtenances of a robust water system. In FY20, we will address needed improvements to the Moanalua and Quarry pipeline tunnel. We will continue our program to replace plastic service laterals that have prematurely reached the end of their service lives. That sketch in the bottom right shows a service lateral which connects a water main in the street to the water meter in front of your home. We have learned the plastic material we previously used becomes brittle with age and cracks, resulting in service leaks. This year, 338 laterals will be replaced in the Waipio and Waikele areas. Finally, we will also continue with improvements to extend the lives of our granular activated carbon water treatment facilities. We will continue with phase 2 of our meter transponder replacement efforts, continue our efforts to safeguard all Board of Water Supply facilities, and make much needed improvements to the Beretania complex, specifically the exterior of this public service building. We'll also continue upkeep of our reservoirs, pump stations, and other facilities. Final category, capacity expansion, includes these projects. Metro 180 storage will be supplemented with a new 2 million gallon reservoir on the slopes of Papakolea. We will also increase source capacity in the Metro 180 system with the new Wailai West well, and also improve service reliability within the Mililani water system with a new Mililani 994 booster station. So these are the highlights of the FY20 CIP. As I said at the beginning, our division heads and staff officers are here to provide greater detail on any project that you find of particular interest, and I'm happy to answer any questions, or they're happy to answer any questions right now.
Are there any questions?
Members, any questions? I just have one.
Yeah.
On the renewal and replacement of pipelines, what goes into selection of which ones?
As part of the Water Master Plan, we went through extensive condition assessment, which included looking at what we have as one of our most valuable assets, which was a very close accounting of water main breaks over the last 40 years. And so we've got a lot of data to work with. We're using a computer program that uses our main break history built on top of our award-winning geographic information system, and it will actually identify areas for replacement based on history, pipe material, soil conditions. All of these things go into the analysis and will generate projects and identify them by priority. And we'll address them as we can. Of course, there's other things that go into that. We'll look at where other things are needed, like fire protection improvements, that kind of thing, or where we can coordinate, or we need to coordinate with other city, state agencies. So all of those go into determining where we do our next pipeline job. Yeah, our staff does a great job on that.
And am I reading this right? We're going from approximately, we're going to have 13.3 miles currently under construction?
There are currently, and this is active construction right now.
Yeah.
Does not include what we awarded last fiscal years, because those are just getting ready to start. And then we have what we're awarding this fiscal year, which a lot of it is out to bid right now. I think we have like $40 million worth of projects bidding. So yeah, this year's target is 7 miles, so that'll add at least 7 miles more. It's just going to increase every year. So this number of active construction is going to continue to increase till we get up to the 21 miles, and then it'll be 21 miles every year. And so yeah, it's going to reach a level where it will stabilize, but it's going to be a lot of road work.
Just to build on a point that board member Sue made earlier, I'm very interested in, Ernie, I know you said you're going to put this on a topic for a future agenda, but I'm very interested in the necessary adaptation planning and whatever other implementation measures are going to be necessary for climate resiliency. And in particular, in thinking about future CIP planning, I'm wondering, what that's going to cost us and what we're looking at over the the short and long term. There's been a lot of modeling that's been happening right now. There's a lot of action that's being taken on the continent, as far as, you know, who pays for that kind of work, and so I'm just interested in where we are right now.
Yeah, so I think that when we have that briefing, we'd like to probably bring in some guest speakers like Chip Fletcher, or Tom
Absolutely.
Gianluca. And we'll probably have to allocate a good solid 45 minutes and 1 hour or longer for that. But
Great.
in the meantime, if I could ask Barry to come up to give an update on our Water Research Foundation project, which is nearing final completion and hopefully getting published soon.
Great, and just to clarify really quickly, so, well, I'd love to hear from Chip and Tom. I'm kind of up on the work that they've been doing, and so what I'm interested in hearing from the board is sort of what implications do Chip and Tom's work have for us specifically, and what are we gonna, you know, both in the short term and the long term, what is that gonna mean for us dollar-wise as far as planning, and what we're gonna need to implement to help build resilience?
So Barry can add a little bit more to that, but
Okay,
before
perfect.
he starts, there's something, in addition to the research foundation that we just started to participate, is there's a group of about 12 or 13 large utilities from the
Great.
East Coast to the West Coast. They have something called the Water Utility Climate Alliance, and they've been organized since the 2000s. And we are going to start to participate in part of their networking of utilities across the country to share challenges and ideas and solutions on how to address the issues of that climate change is going to create impacts on utilities, on resources, on our customers.
What's the name again?
The Water Utility
Climate Alliance.
Climate Alliance, WUCA. Yeah. WUCA. So you can Google that and they're online. Barry?
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members. And back about 2 years ago, we partnered with the Water Research Foundation on a tailored collaboration study on climate vulnerability of both the water supply as well as the coastal infrastructure to increase resilience for projected climate change to 2100. So the study, which we presented to the City Climate Commission and got some feedback as well, identified, so UH has two rainfall predictions for 2100. One is dry and one is wet. Two different.
Very different.
I could have told them that. Anyway, but, two different downscaling models, statistical and dynamical. And in the wet future, where Windward and Honolulu would get wetter, we'd still get some drying in the leeward side, but we wouldn't have to change our long-range plan that much if it gets wetter. But if it gets drier by like about 30% drier, primarily in the leeward areas. And so what implications does that have on our ability, or the impacts to our sources in Waianae, for instance, and in Kunia, Ewa? We certainly knew that we had to ramp up our conservation program, have to diversify our water supply systems from just not only groundwater, but recycled water. So we currently are adding about 4 million gallons of source capacity at our Honolulu recycled water treatment plant, with provisions to do another 2 once we get enough secondary from the city. And they are expanding their secondary treatment in Honolulu. And so all of the regulatory and master planning around expanding our recycled water system in Ewa is ongoing. Ho'opili will have dual water systems. There's one new golf course plan, so we'll expand recycled water where we can. We're also looking at other areas, but that's our primarily our focus on recycled water. Source diversification also includes desalination. We are working on a request for proposals on a 2 million gallon seawater desal plant at the site that was acquired through public conveyance from the closure of the Barbers Point Naval Air Station. So a design, build, operate, maintain contract. It's been several years going, but it's quite challenging. But we are moving towards seawater desalination. We also have provisions to do a brackish desal plant at our proposed Kapolei base yard, right Makai of the city of Kapolei. Investigating stormwater, we're investing in the watershed forest management partnerships, the watershed partnerships to ensure that forests are healthy in case it starts to get more dry, that the forests are healthy enough to capture what rainfall that will come. So we did evaluation of what the impacts would be on the sustainable yields in that drying scenario, and it will drop, and we understand kind of like where, some in Honolulu, but mostly in Waianae and in the Waipahu area. So what will we do to compensate for that? If we are, that's a 2100, so that's 80 years away. We'll continue to monitor that, but if it starts to go on that trend, we would have to ramp up, make our conservation and watersheds and diversified strategies more aggressive. And I'll be able to explain that in a presentation on that. As far as sea level rise, we have been contributing some funding for research for Chip Fletcher and his group. They've modeled the sea level rise areas, and then the hotspots really in town, Waikiki to Mapunapuna. And what can be done to elevate streets. The current research project is to overlay the sea level rise with flooding, 100-year floods. They don't have that yet. The 100-year flood of yesterday will not be the 100-year flood of tomorrow. It'll be more intense. So how do you adapt to that? The coastal areas will be eroded. We may lose some beach homes, may affect some of the bridges. We identified 21 bridges that are in the low-lying areas where if through sea level rise and more intense storms, the pipes that are hung on the bridge or under the bridge could be vulnerable. So we need to beef that up when the bridges are replaced, that it'd be more resilient. We're looking at different pipe materials for when we start to replace those areas in those sea level rise areas. We expect the metallic pipe to corrode faster because it'll be in contact with seawater. So looking at new materials, HDPE, PVC, bonded coatings on ductile iron pipelines to continue to extend the life or ensure the life of those pipelines are 100 years or more. We know what areas will be inundated. Now it's, well, what areas does the city decide to lift? We have to elevate, we have to install stormwater pumps in those areas because it's very flat. How do you adapt to sea level rise? It's beyond the board's capability. It really requires the city and the state to collaborate. And to that end, we're looking at this approach called One Water, which is a collaborative framework upon which we identify those areas that have cross-sector benefits, stormwater, water, wastewater, recycled water, and seeing where we can partner and focus our limited funds on those critical areas. So there's a lot going on, but that in a nutshell is what we're trying to do. And I'd be happy to present that in a future board meeting.
Any other questions?
Well, I'm interested in the overlap of your work and your work.
Exactly.
So, you know, if we're deciding on what pipes to replace, are we avoiding or maybe accelerating some of these critical areas that are more vulnerable?
Yeah, the 6th year and the master plan was done with under Water Resources. Of course, it included all the divisions. Water Resources does update the 20, the long-range CIP, as well as the 6. My staff maintains the prioritization model for pipelines, and that feeds into the annual budget that Jason implements. So there's connectivity there, but there's a lot to do. Just got to get to doing it.
Yeah,
Thank you.
thank you. Thanks, Aaron. Are there any other questions? Jade?
You know, the replacement of the pumping units, how long do they last? What is the life of the pump? Or what is it?
Pumps are mechanical, electrical systems, and I think we've used maybe around 10 years before we have to actually replace the motors and pumps. That is continuing, has a shorter lifespan than a pipeline, but because it's a mechanical electrical system.
So it's about 10 years.
Yeah, like our deep wells, we should be probably getting about 10 years or so out of that. I don't know if that's about right, Jason.
Yeah, and it depends on the type of pump and the installation. Submersibles is last, right? What did you say? 10? Yeah. And maybe a little bit more.
I think the other area that we are looking at more closely too is the condition of the well casing itself too, which is also metal. Some of it's pretty old underground. Jade, some of the areas that we have to coordinate closely with the DOT is the coastal highways where we have pipelines in them. And I know that you're having challenges in North Shore, Kolaloa too, just trying to protect it from what's happening even right now. And we have some large pipelines, especially in Kolaloa, near the highway or in the right of way. So I'm glad you're on the board, because all of this is going to require everybody being in the canoe together and paddling in the same direction at the same timing to get this done.
All right, members, any further questions?
Anything else on the CIP? Otherwise, I'll turn it back over to Mr. Morita to summarize. Thank you.
Okay, so like as when we started off, so the operating budget is approximately $18.1 million over fiscal year 19. So this year it is at for the proposed FY 2020 budget, it's $204.4 million. The CIP budget is $166.3 million, which is $27.8 million over fiscal year 19. And if you combine the two numbers, then we are looking at an increase of $45.9 million over fiscal year 19. And again, though, this includes borrowed funds this time around. That this is not an all-cash total. So the figures there, especially with the bond issue, will track effectively the effective life of some of the capital improvement program budgets, which is intentional in that now, instead of cash funding all of our capital improvements all at one time, we were able to spread the costs to future ratepayers who benefit from the improvements that we're putting into place.
And the approach is actually, we're looking closely at our long-range financial plan that the board also adopted, which was a balance of borrowing and using rate revenue or cash to fund the capital program. So we'll be sure to, I think, bring that up. Are there any questions for Robert or anybody on the proposed budget?
Members?
If I could, actually, he's not gone yet. But as you know, Robert will be retiring at the end of May. So this is the last budget workshop for him before he moves on to happier and greener pastures. But thank you for your questions. We'll look at improving our presentation for the public hearing on the proposed budget and try to address some of the concerns that we were not able to address today.
All right.
Appreciate your time.
Someone who's been there. Retiring doesn't mean disappearing.
Yeah, I don't know which pasture Ernie is referring to, but
There are different ones.
no, I'm excited to see where life takes me. You know, this is definitely not the end, but it's just I'm looking forward to a change, and I'm sure it'll be I've got lots of options out there, so it'll be really interesting.
I just want to say, recognize Robert for doing a great job for his time.
Thank you.
Is that the occasion for the haircut?
Well, maybe.
All right, Manager Lau, any further business before the
No,
board?
that's it,
All right.
Chair.
I entertain a motion to adjourn. Second. Okay, moved and seconded, motion to adjourn. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye. All those opposed say nay. All right, we stand adjourned.
Thank you.
Every drop of water is part of a journey. It begins as water vapor that falls to earth as rain. For the next 25 years, it's filtered through volcanic rock. At last, it arrives at its final destination. Really? Can somebody come fix this?
When it comes to water, don't waste a drop.